Hey everybody, it's Respect the Roast. It's Raul here. We got John. You know, last video we talked about Ethiopia Sidamo. You know, it's just out. We're talking about how to brew it on a French press. We went through what that tastes like. We're not going to do that again. Today is specifically about brewing on the Chemex.
Absolutely. Chemex is a really unique way to brew. It's very similar to a pour-over style. One of the most unique things is the filter. They come pre-folded, usually. And you have square style, you also have round style. This is a square, unbleached style filter. We're also going to use an 8-cup Chemex. They sell some smaller ones. They also sell different styles, some with glass handles. This one just has like a little bamboo style handle here. The other thing that we're going to use is also a scale to measure out in grams. Now, we don't normally have a gram scale in our stores, but what I'll do is include some information along the bottom of the screen, or maybe like a slide, just so you guys can see what it would look like using the tools and resources that we have in our stores.
Cool. Now, the whole reason for doing this is obviously, as many of you already know, depending on how you brew your coffee, you may change that taste, that flavor profile. A French press is super robust. You get a lot of flavor in there. A Chemex is also, in its own way, robust, but it's going to be very clean because of this filter, this unbleached filter John's talking about. It removes so many things, so many of those naturally occurring oils in the coffee, a lot of that sediment you may get in your French press, all that's going to be stripped away, and what the final product is a very clean tasting cup of coffee. And for something like a sun-dried Ethiopia, that's really good news. Now, as you saw, John started to wet the filter of the Chemex. That's the first step in brewing with your Chemex. Now, John, why did you wet your filter?
Basically, you want to wash away any residual paper flavors that might be in the filter or pull through the coffee as it extracts. Not only that, but you want to create a nice seal along the rim or the wall of the Chemex brewer itself. And then one very important thing is that it's also going to warm the vessel that we're going to be brewing our coffee into. I usually like to give it a nice little swirl. I usually do about 12 ounces of water, nothing crazy. Just remember that you're going to need a little bit extra water when you are boiling it or gathering it, whatever you need to do. Once you got that, you can easily just pour it out of the spout here. Now, one thing that you wanted to keep in mind is when you fold a filter, you're left with one side that's going to have 3 pieces of paper, so it's going to be 3 filters thick, basically. You want that to be on the side of the spout. That when you pour it out, it provides some structure there. Okay? So I'm going to go dump this water out. I'll be right back, and then we'll start brewing, okay?
Hey guys, we're back. As we said, today we're brewing with the Chemex coffee brewer. Now, for our purposes today, in order to stay very accurate, we have brought in a scale. We know that many of you don't have access to a scale. If you do, awesome. If you don't, that is okay. In this case, we are using the scale. Now, the one thing I always like to point out with the Chemex is that if you ever do this or use this brewing method at home, in front of people, it is extremely flattering. It's a very nice piece of brewing equipment, and they're a lot of fun. Now, John, why don't you go ahead and describe sort of what's going on at this present moment?
So, I just weighed out my dosage. Now, there's a common ratio of coffee to water that you would typically use on a brewing process. It's usually a 16 to 1 or a 17 to 1. So basically what that means, for every gram of coffee, you're going to have 16 or 17 grams of water. Now, with this specific recipe, something I use at home and really enjoy, I'm using a 17 to 1 ratio. So what that means for me is I have 47 grams of coffee, and then I'm going to add a total of 800 grams of water.
Now, I will say that if you don't have access to this scale, but you do have access to a Chemex and you're in your store, don't fret. Think all you need, if you have that pour-over scoop, that's 8 scoops of your pour-over scoop of coffee, of ground coffee, and then pour water until you're up to about just below this bamboo handle, and you'll be good to go. So like I said, if you don't have a scale, don't fret. Use your pour-over scoop, 8 scoops, hot water.
Yeah. All right. So, what did I just do here? What is this now?
What is this process? That's a great question. So just like a pour over, this first pour is actually not the first pour. This first pour is called the bloom. Isn't that right, John?
Yes, it is. And what are we doing during the bloom?
What are we doing during the bloom? So if you think about when we first roast coffee and then we package that coffee, a lot of gases get trapped in that bag and with that coffee. Now when you go to brew with its pour over a Chemex, that first pour, that bloom is releasing those gases, giving that coffee time to breathe. A lot of times it mushrooms up, and then when it goes back down, you continue to pour. That's just going to help aerate your coffee and give you a better flavor. Now, as it continues to pour on, this is technically the first pour.
Now, one thing that I try and do when I do this is I pour in 100-gram intervals every 20 to 30 seconds, and I want to start from the center of the filter and spiral myself out, okay? And this just allows time for the brewing process to happen.
Now I will say with the Chemex, just like with a pour over, and you're going to notice those two are mentioned in tandem often because they're very similar. How you brew them is similar. Now with that being said, as you all I'm sure are aware, a pour over takes some time and so does the Chemex. Enjoy that process. As John has pointed out, as I pointed out, this is part of the craft of brewing coffee. Enjoy it, take your time with it, develop your method, and then take that passion and take that development to your store, to your partners and customers.
Absolutely, well said. You know, there's going to be no 2 cups of coffee that are going to be the same. One of the things that some people say is, hey, fill this sucker up, or hey, don't fill it up. You know what? Develop your own style and do what pleases you and do what makes a cup of coffee that you genuinely enjoy. Now I'm at 400 grams right now, and like I said, I need a total of 800. So
halfway there.
We're halfway there, definitely.
Now maybe at this part of your brewing process that you experiment with what we refer to as agitating your coffee grounds, okay? What that could mean is after you've poured on, you may have something like a spoon, a stir stick, and all you're gonna do is sort of rake, not stir, but sort of gently rake your coffee in your filter back and forth just a little bit. Now what that does is it just helps any of the grounds, any of the micro grounds that are in your filter that haven't necessarily maybe been fully saturated, haven't been fully extracted, it helps those be completely processed. Now unfortunately there's a downside to this, which is over extracting, it's over agitating. So don't be rough with it, you don't have to be violent, it's a very gentle method. It's kind of like a Zen garden, right? That's what you got to think of when you do your agitation.
What's going on with the grind when we do a Chemex, Raul? What kind of grind do we want?
John, that's an excellent point. So unlike a pour over, this is where the two are very different. A pour over, what do you need? Finely ground coffee, right? With the Chemex, it's not going to be that way. All you need is basically a medium to coarse grind coffee will do. And in fact, some people would argue you could go as far as a French press, but I think for our purposes and for yours as well, a medium to coarse would be just fine.
So using the grinder here in the store, what that means for you guys, we have the black ditting style grinder with the knob on the side. I think everyone's switched over to that style, but it's the slot in between French press and metal filter.
I believe it's number 8, but don't quote me, check it out.
I believe it is number 8. So I'm coming up here on the end of my water dosage. You go over a couple grams, it's not the end of the world, don't worry. If you go over like 70 grams, then you got an issue.
Now here's the beauty of a Chemex, and I think John can maybe agree. You know, unlike a pour over, many of you I'm sure have had this experience where you're brewing for a customer, for yourself, and you go to maybe lift the filter a little bit, and you tear the filter, and it all comes rushing out, and you've ruined your whole cup of coffee, and you got to start again. With a Chemex, with this strong of a filter, that's not something you have to worry about. And in fact, many experts would say towards the end, it is completely acceptable to lift your filter, let it finish brewing the last few seconds, and then discard that filter.
Just a couple tips that when you're brewing a Chemex, you don't want to let your grounds dry. You want to keep the water dosage there. That's why you always want to add it every 20-30 seconds. When you let the grounds be exposed to air, it's going to really affect the flavors, and you might end up getting like a kind of a bitter coffee, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely, I totally agree.
So I'm almost done with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this filter out and just kind of put my corners together, and then tuck this side in, tuck this side in.
John, did you notice anything when you lifted that filter, the suction or anything out of it?
I had to be careful when I pulled it off. It did create a nice seal, and what that does is it ends up channeling all that water down into the very tip of this filter. We talked about the type of grind that you want. One way to tell if your grind is good and your pours are good is how the water is coming down out of the filter. If it's kind of just like spitting and just kind of like slowly dripping, you probably have too many fines in that grind. If you have a nice steady stream, you know your grind is right. Now in this case, my brew time took just over 6 minutes, actually just only 8 seconds over 6 minutes. That's about ballpark for where I want to be. If you're doing a less coffee, maybe like 30 to just only 40 grams of coffee, you might only need to be brewing for about 4 minutes or so, maybe 4.5.
Absolutely. I say we grab some cups and let's get to trying this Chemex.
Absolutely.
All right.
Meet us back here for a taste.
Now, John, let me ask you, in terms of a difference between, say, the French press we tried in our last video, and then maybe even the pour over, what can you expect difference-wise?
The main difference is going to be the cleanness of the coffee that you get out of the Chemex brewing method. The French press, that's really the essential raw way to enjoy coffee. Really excellent way to get your first taste of a new coffee that you haven't tasted before. The Chemex has that super thick filter, so you're not going to have any of that fine sediment that would be left at the bottom of your cup from a French press. So that's one notable characteristic, just the pure cleanness of it. And that thick filter does filter out a lot of the oils. Looking at this coffee, it was pretty oily, so it'll be interesting to taste the difference compared to the French press. So.
Well, to keep with continuity from our last video, we are the Space Coast. We're right by the shuttle launch, so I say we 3, 2, 1 this bad boy, huh?
3, 2, 1.
Let's try it.
Sit.
Fascinating, John. What do you think? What are you picking up?
I would like to note that the really pronounced berry flavor that we have from the French press kind of just mellowed out, and you're left with more of the dark chocolatey, smoother. I think the acidity is a little bit lower.
I agree, and in fact, when we tried it on the French press, you did get those berries, those stone fruits. I didn't pick up black cherry on the Chemex like I thought I would, but on the French press rather. On the Chemex, however, I do get a particular maybe tartness. There's a little bit of a tart flavor I'm getting that I kind of like. It's different.
It's really buried into the flavor profile of this coffee. I mean, when you talk about having a cleaner cup of coffee and the Chemex not being as raw of a way to, extract some coffee, this is it still has a really deep complexity to it.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's still very smooth. The one thing I will say, now that we've tried the Ethiopia Sidamo sun process twice, once on the French press, now on the Chemex, both times very smooth in your mouth. That feels very silky. The body, maybe it's still about what I thought in the last video, 1%, 2% milk kind of feel in my mouth, and the acidity you're getting on the back of your tongue there, on the sides. Yeah, the flavor, many things are the same, but there are some pronounced differences that I think if you had the opportunity to try them both, I would say you should.
Definitely. While we're on the topic of, Chemex, if you have a unique way of brewing at home, feel free to bring it in and share it with your partners. I have a Chemex at my house. I know people that have siphon coffee makers, even soft brews. Obviously pour over is an obvious one, but all these different methods of brewing really bring out different characteristics of coffee.
Absolutely. Your partners are going to appreciate it, and I tell you what, more than likely, if you're doing this anywhere that's to be seen, customers are going to be curious. They're going to ask you what you're doing. They're going to want to know about that process and about that coffee, and that is a great opportunity for you to share your passion and your knowledge and have a fun time with your customers and partners. So excited. Thank you for being here, and I think we're going to try one other thing today, John, aren't we?
We are going to do a Chemex iced.
Wow. Nice.
See you in a few. We're going to go prepare.
Well, hello everybody. We're back, and just as we said before we left, we are here to do an iced Chemex. one of the beauties and the versatility that lies within the Chemex is that you can do it hot or iced, and both ways are just as beautiful regardless. Now, for this setup, we're still keeping with the 800 total grams of volume between the ice and the water, right? But in this case, we're doing 400 grams of ice that we pre-measured out, and then 400 grams of water is what we're gonna go until we get to 800 total. For the coffee, it's 47 grams of ground coffee that we also measured out. And in case you don't have a scale, again, like I said before, at your store, that is okay. For your sake, you could use 2 tall scoops of ice, and then you could do a venti ice cup of water, essentially, is what it's gonna come out to, and you should be just fine with that.
You always want to just follow that. For every 2 tablespoons of coffee you're using, do 6 fluid ounces of water. And in this case, the amount of water that you're supposed to have, just divide that by 2. 1/2 of that will be ice. And then a good way to measure out ice is using the volumetric scoop.
Absolutely. It was the 8 grams of coffee, or the 8 scoops rather of coffee. So pretty much the same as before, with just a few little differences to do an iced Chemex.
That was a really nice bloom on there.
Now, John, do you happen to remember what method it actually is called to brew a hot coffee directly over ice, creating an iced coffee?
I know it was inspired by the Japanese, right?
Absolutely, that is correct. That's called a Japanese-style iced coffee. Whenever you brew hot coffee directly over ice, that's the method that it's referred to. And why? It's because what happens when you're brewing that coffee hot directly over ice, it sort of traps the flavor instantly. All those oils instantly are sort of captured by the ice. Instead of letting the coffee brew and then dumping ice into it and sort of diluting the flavor, you're just capturing it. Absolutely. All right, I do believe we are at that point, John. So let's go ahead and let's take that filter off. Huh?
Yeah.
Remember, when you're doing this, all you're doing is you're breaking the seal. You don't have to worry about your filter bursting or breaking of any kind because the filter's so thick. So you can take it right off, let it finish dripping. And while we do this, John, do you want to talk about sort of what temperature you're looking at? A lot of people expect what when they're done with this?
This one actually feels nice and cold. There is a little bit of ice just kind of hanging out there. And that's okay. You know, eventually it will all melt, and it is an iced coffee, so it's nice to have a few ice cubes left in there. If you have a ton of ice and just a little bit of coffee, you're probably gonna taste a little under extracted because, again, remember this ice made up the total brew volume that we were aiming for, all right, so we have tried Ethiopia just about every single way. Just kidding, there's 1,000 different ways you can brew coffee, but we tried it French press on our last video. We did it hot Chemex, and now we just did an iced Chemex, and we're here to pour it.
Enjoy the fruits of our labor. Is that right, John?
Yes.
All right. So again, continuity. We're gonna do the 3, 2, 1 sip, but let's get the coffee poured.
Now, just to note, most of that ice is melted all the way. There's just a few little residual pieces in there.
And again, you know, I really can't say it enough, but with the Chemex, it's just such a beautiful way to brew your coffee. I mean, it looks phenomenal, and the resultant product tastes phenomenal as well. So, all right, let's 3, 2, 1 sip this bad boy.
3, 2,
1 sip. Ooh, it's nice.
Nice and cold.
You know, I'm gonna say, for me, it's funny with this coffee. Maybe it's because it's a naturally processed coffee, so it's a little bit lighter, but I almost feel like I'm drinking like a tea, like a very sturdy coffee-flavored tea.
Really?
And I don't mean that in a bad way. In fact, I mean it in a very good way.
Very unique.
It's very unique. It's not watered down. It's very full-bodied, and to me, it tastes like I'm having a coffee tea. You know?
Yeah, you know, when you think of it, when you try and compare it to an iced coffee, you know, you have to be careful into what you compare it to. If you try and compare it to our
cold brew,
or just our regular iced coffee, or like an iced Americano, those are on the complete other spectrum than this coffee.
Absolutely.
So you definitely have to be careful on what you compare it to. Really, instead of comparing it to something at first, when you're trying to develop that coffee flavor profile, really dig into just the coffee specifically and see what you can learn about it. And what I learned about this coffee is that it's an excellent coffee on the French press. I like the French press a little bit better than the Chemex, in my opinion. Iced is really light, and honestly, it's refreshing.
Very refreshing. With summer right around the corner, it's getting hot all across the country. I can imagine this would be a great coffee to bust out at these upcoming barbecues, anything with a nice salad, some barbecue chicken or something. I think this would complement it well.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great experience with this coffee.
Absolutely, absolutely. So guys, we'll wrap it up here. Try the Sidamo any way you can. As John mentioned earlier, if you have a brewing method at home that maybe your store doesn't have access to, bring it in, get permission from your store manager to bring it in, have a tasting. Your partners are gonna love you, your customers are gonna love to see it. And then it's just fun to see how the coffee will react depending on your brewing method.
And if you guys ever have any questions with anything you're doing, for me, the internet, YouTube, and other things like that are always a great resource. Starbucks Coffee Company also provides us with an immense amount of tools and resources for your everyday questions that you might have. And also, Raul and I are both here. You know where we work, and feel free to give us a call, email, whatever. If you see us in passing, feel free to give us your ideas and whatever you've been doing, and yeah.
Absolutely. And for those of you who have commented on our YouTube page, we have not forgotten you, and we're coming for you. And we'll see you next time on Respect the Roast. Thank you.
Cheers. Hi there, partners. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Respect the Roast. Please remember to like and share, and, maybe drop us a line in the comments section with any suggestions or questions. Thanks.